This is a voiceover presentation of the Continuous Improvement Workshop put on by the Education Quality Assurance team with the Vermont Agency of Education during October of 2018. The focus is on conducting comprehensive needs assessments and conducting Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles. Continuous improvement is not linear. We will be presenting the Comprehensive Needs Assessment and Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles using a linear format, but the tools and process can be done in a number of ways using a variety of different tools. It is expected that the plan will be adjusted and updated as you test change ideas and analyze the data from those tests. This is a reminder that this process is not a straight line. The goal of the workshop is to prepare school and district leaders to engage in comprehensive needs assessment and Plan, Do, Study, Act cycles toward data-informed decision-making for their 2019-2020 continuous improvement plans. The objectives are to review and clarify the steps of a comprehensive needs assessment, develop a logical sequence of action steps for testing a change idea, and identify baseline data, types of measures, instruments and tools, and process and outcome data to be utilized in each change idea's PDSA cycle. The basis of all things continuous improvement comes down to these three questions. 1, what are we trying to accomplish? Which means, what is your goal? What do you want to do? 2, what change can we make that will be an improvement? Which means, what incremental change idea can we put in place to make a difference? And 3, how will we know when a change is an improvement? When we ask this question, we are talking about measures and determining the ways you actually know if something has improved. This is done by measuring the differences from before, during, and after an implemented change idea. This arrow represents the steps involved in a comprehensive needs assessment. In a comprehensive needs assessment, you need to gather a needs assessment team that is comprised of collaborative stakeholders, develop or revise a shared vision for your LEA and/or school, determine broad areas of focus that are based on a broad data review, identify priority problems of practice, identify the root cause of the problem of practice, and then develop a working theory of improvement. On page 14 of the Education Quality Standards, it states, a continuous improvement plan shall be developed and implemented in each public school district. The plan shall be developed with the involvement of school board members, students, teachers, administrators, parents, and community members. All of these people within your collaborative stakeholder group will not be involved in every step of the continuous improvement process, but they need to be involved in the steps that are appropriate and applicable to the roles they play within continuous improvement in your learning community. A shared vision is a statement of your team's common beliefs, values, and goals that you have for school and student outcomes. It is where you want to be. You may not be there now, but it provides a common goal, language, and expectations to work towards. The shared vision statement should be written in the present tense. The vision statement guides the direction and choices you make as a learning community. For more guidance on revising and developing a shared vision statement, you can use the shared vision worksheet found on pages 8 and 22 in the March 2018 version of the Comprehensive Needs Assessment Toolkit. The broad area focus is what the team will determine as a result of completing an extensive data overview. A broad data overview allows teams to look at demographic data, student outcome data, school process data, and perception data. There is a list of types of data that fall under each category in Appendix 1 of the March 2018 version of the Comprehensive Needs Assessment Toolkit, found on page 21. You can organize the collected data from the data overview using the data inventory sheet in the Comprehensive Needs Assessment Toolkit, found on pages 9 and 23. The broad area of focus will reveal general areas of need identified from the data overview and will provide an initial direction for a deeper analysis. The broad areas of focus is influenced by the shared vision, the education quality standards, feedback and recommendations from the integrated field review, and the annual snapshots. Once a broad focus area has been identified, it is time to delve deeper within that focus area to identify a problem or problems of practice. This is done by doing a further and more specific examination of the data that pertains directly to the broad area of focus. Once all of the additional data has been collected, factual observations are made. These observations should be objective and free of assumptions or biases, only stating what the data shows. As soon as you have a clear picture of the facts revealed by the data, you can move on to making inferences about what these facts are telling you. These inferences should be based logically on your factual observations. Oftentimes, additional evidence will be needed to support an inference, leading to more data collection and observations. At this point, it is possible to make a hypothesis about what the true problem is. This is your identified problem of practice. You may have more than one problem of practice, so it is important to prioritize which problem or problems should or need to be addressed immediately. There is a problem of practice worksheet on pages 12 and 24 of the Comprehensive Needs Assessment Toolkit that can help your team with this process. Once you determine your priority problem of practice, you need to figure out why that problem is happening, or determine the root cause of that issue. The root cause identifies what, how, and why a problem of practice occurred and helps to prevent that problem from recurring. Root causes are specific and reasonably identified underlying causes of the problem of practice. They are within your control to fix and allow for recommendations and solutions. You will know once you have reached the root cause because when you address a specific cause or reason, you can make the reason for that issue go away. This is one of the tools we recommend you use to help determine the causes for your problem of practice. It is a fishbone diagram or a cause and effect diagram. In the box on the right-hand side labeled problem, you write your priority problem of practice. The green boxes on the left have been pre-filled with 6 broad cause categories. These are categories we recommend that you begin with when starting your fishbone diagram. In most cases, a root cause of a problem of practice within education will fall within one or more of these categories: resources, skills, knowledge, measures, environment, and processes. However, if one or more of these categories don't fit with your problem of practice, that is all right. Just pick the ones that pertain to your problem. Then, with your team, begin to brainstorm subcauses within each pertinent category and add them along the ribs. You can find an example in Blake Fishbone worksheet in the Comprehensive Needs Assessment Toolkit on pages 15 and 25. You can use the 5 Whys worksheet during a root cause analysis to determine the root cause of the problem of practice. Using this sheet, you will brainstorm the reasons why the problem is occurring by asking why a handful of times. The general rule of thumb is 5 times, but you may need to ask more or less. Remember that the answers you come up with to answer your why question needs to be something within your control and cannot be caused by one individual person. Make sure you have data to support your reasons. Once you've gotten to the point where you feel if the identified cause is addressed, the problem will go away, you have identified the root cause. A working theory of improvement is the roadmap that articulates and guides the results you are hoping to accomplish, how you plan to accomplish the goal, and who is responsible for making the results happen. A driver diagram is a visual display of your theory of improvement. It shows all of the possible options of how you can get to your goal. As you begin to test change ideas, it is very likely that the driver diagram will need to be updated and changed over time. One thing to keep in mind while you develop a theory of improvement is that there are different levels of goals. There are big, overarching multi-year goals at both the LEA and school levels, but within those multi-year goals are benchmark goals that are more focused. There are also goals that relate directly to the identified priority problem of practice and root cause. Focusing on narrowing down the goals to smaller incremental goals will help make it easier to achieve your bigger, broader goal and know exactly where you are in the process. Regardless of the size of the goal, ask yourself and your needs assessment team, What specifically are we trying to accomplish? All goals for improvement should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, describing what will be improved, by how much, by when, and for what or whom. Take a moment to look at these goal statements. Do they meet the criteria? Remember, the four main questions have to be answered. What will be improved? How much? By when? For what and whom? Let's look at example 1. By this coming June, we will reduce chronic absenteeism among CHS ninth graders to 0. What will be improved? A reduction in chronic absenteeism. How much? 0. By when? This coming June. For what or whom? CHS ninth graders. This goal meets the criteria. Example 2 says, by the end of the school year, students will feel motivated to attend school every day. What will be improved? Students' feeling about motivation. How much? It doesn't say. This goal does not meet the criteria. Example 3 says, by May 30th, all CHS faculty will have completed a phone call home for at least 5 chronically absent students. What will be improved? It's not very clear what will be improved. This goal does not meet the criteria. Now take a moment to review your school or LEA's SMART goals. Do your goals meet the criteria and answer the 4 questions? What will be improved? How much? By when? For what or for whom? Remember that SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. A driver is the area of practice or a component of the system that has the greatest influence on the goal. There are 2 types of driver. The primary driver or primary drivers are the broad areas and components that have the greatest influence on the goal. You usually choose 2 to 5 primary drivers. Secondary drivers are more specific, and they're practices and components that influence the primary drivers. Keep in mind that secondary drivers can apply to more than one primary driver. Change ideas relate to the second of the 3 main questions of continuous improvement. What change can we make that will be an improvement? Change ideas are directly related to or influence your secondary drivers. They are specific, measurable, and actionable. Most importantly, they are bite-sized or incremental, so we can test them to see if they have an impact on the overall goal. The 3 main areas change ideas come from are research knowledge. What does the literature say about this problem? Practice knowledge. What have others done to solve this problem? And finally, design or creative thinking. What ideas can you come up with to solve the problem? The grain size of the change idea itself is important to remember because you need to be able to test that idea. We are looking for the Goldilocks of change ideas. We want it to be just right. Change ideas that are too big are programs, curricula, overarching school policies, and overarching structures. We want to test components within these. Change ideas that are too small are immediate action steps, tools, or materials that are outside the process. Change ideas that are just right are practices, processes, and smaller policies within the overarching policy and smaller structures within the overarching structure that you can test in 4 to 6 week cycles. The final question of continuous improvement asks, how will we know when a change is an improvement? You have to be able to measure that there was a change and if that change had any impact on getting closer to reaching your goal. There are different types of measures that can help you determine that. Process measures are used to measure how well the change idea was implemented. For example, doing walkthrough observations to observe how a specific learning strategy is being implemented. Outcome measures are used to measure the intended results of a change idea. Leading outcome measures are short-term measures like formative assessments and exit tickets. Lagging outcome measures are the long-term measures or summative assessments, such as SBAC. Balancing measures measure unintended impacts of a change idea. These are the changes that you didn't intend to happen. Here is an example of a real driver diagram that is currently being used in a school in Vermont. As you can see, the secondary drivers apply to more than one primary driver. The areas highlighted in green show the change idea that is currently being tested, as change ideas are not expected to be tested all at one time. The school has a goal of improving pre-K through grade 1 performance and readiness in mathematics, discourse, and inquiry by greater than expected outcomes as measured by Ames-Webb by 2019. The change idea they are testing is using an end-of-lesson discussion protocol that uses open-ended questions. Teachers will be measuring the effectiveness of this change idea by using a teacher survey and tracking the number of students who explain their thinking and the frequency at which students explain their thinking. This change idea is directly related to the secondary driver of teacher content and pedagogical knowledge, which in turn is directly related to two primary drivers, curriculum and instruction and standards. Once goals, drivers, and change ideas have been determined, you can begin to write your team's working theory of improvement statement, which states the result you are hoping to accomplish, shows how you plan to accomplish a goal, and also shows who is responsible for making the goal happen. To actually write a theory of improvement statement using your driver diagram, work from right to left, starting with the change idea and ending with the goal using a cause and effect statement or an if-then statement. For example, if we implement the change idea, then there will be an impact on the secondary driver, then there will be an impact on the primary driver, then we will reach our SMART goal. Remember that this is a working theory, and you will keep coming back to revise it as you test your different change ideas. Let's revisit the driver diagram from 2 slides earlier. On the bottom of the driver diagram, the school has developed 2 theories of improvement. One is an overall theory of improvement that states, if teachers receive appropriate professional development to apply specific practices for facilitating mathematical discourse and inquiry for all students, then teachers' pedagogy will improve. They will have useful informative assessment information to effectively guide daily instruction, and student performance will improve. They have also developed a theory of improvement for the current change idea cycle that is being tested. If teachers consistently apply daily inquiry discussion at the close of the mathematical lesson, then students will be able to explain their understanding and reasoning. Teachers will have valuable formative assessment information from which they can adjust instruction appropriately. Student understanding and academic performance will improve. Once you have completed a comprehensive needs assessment and have developed a working theory of action, you can begin to test change ideas. Using plan, do, study, act cycles is a way to systematically test certain change ideas. Please keep in mind that not all change ideas will be put through a plan, do, study, act cycle. It is recommended that PDSA cycles are kept to about 4 to 6 weeks. This allows for rapid tests that can be tested on a small scale, which makes scaling up easier to monitor and prevents the issues of full-blown implementation before working out major and minor kinks. Using the improvement science approach, represented on the right side of the slide, we test small-scale changes one at a time before implementing it school or district-wide. Using this approach, we take our time testing and doing bite-sized incremental change to make sure the change idea is getting you closer to your goal before full-scale implementation. This diagram details what happens in each stage of the plan, do, study, act cycle. The first stage is to make a plan. Choose the change idea you are going to test, make a prediction or predictions about what you think is going to happen, determine how you will measure the progress toward your goal using process and outcome measures, and make an action plan of how the test will be carried out. Then you implement the change and collect data. Once you have completed the test cycle, you analyze the results and determine if your predictions came true. Finally, you decide whether to adapt the change by making necessary changes, adopt the change and implement and spread on a greater scale, or abandon the change idea and start fresh. Focusing on the grain size of a change idea is very important for PDSA cycles. Not all change ideas will warrant a PDSA cycle, but others do. Understanding how grain size fits within this is important. If the grain size of the change idea is too big, it is difficult to test using PDSA cycles in 4 to 6 week iterations. If a grain size is too small, it will make it difficult to create a test. Since it is not necessary to PDSA every change idea that you have to come up with to help you get to your goal, what do you PDSA? This chart can help you and your team identify what types of change ideas to PDSA. You may have determined that providing professional development to teachers would be a change idea to help you toward your goal. However, you do not PDSA a one-time professional development session. Instead, you would PDSA teachers implementing specific strategies learned during the professional development session. The Plan, Do, Study, Act worksheet can be found on the Education Quality Assurance website. When filling out the worksheet, please be sure to make your predictions and identify how you will determine that the change idea you are testing is an improvement using process and outcome measures. As you work with your team to develop the plan to test a specific change idea, it is important to determine 3 things. 1, determine what specifically you are trying to accomplish. Articulate the goal using the SMART format. 2, identify a change idea with an appropriate grain size from your driver diagram. 3, predict what you think is going to happen by testing the change idea. Once you have decided what change idea you are going to test, you need to figure out whether the change idea was successful or not, which is accomplished through measuring. It is important to think about what you are measuring, how you are going to measure it, with what tool you are going to measure it with, and finally, when it will be measured. It is imperative to measure both the process measures throughout the testing cycle and the outcome measures to be collected at the end of the testing cycle. It is also important that the measures being used are closely aligned with the change idea and tests being carried out. It is also quite imperative that there is trust, transparency, a culture of safety to take risks, and full support from the administration when these tests are being carried out by teachers, coaches, interventionists, and other school personnel. When conducting a PDSA, it is important to collect various types of measures and data. Process measures answer the question, how well was a change practice or idea implemented? Outcome measures answer the question, did the change practice or idea achieve its goal and positively impact the associated driver? How do you know? Basically stated, outcome measures measure how well you achieve the final goal. With outcome measures, we also talk about leading and lagging measures. Leading measures are those that are short-term, such as formative assessments. Lagging measures are long-term or summative assessments, such as SBAC. When conducting PDSAs, it is more customary to use leading outcome measures. Balance measures answer the question, were there any unintended consequences that resulted from implementing the change practice or idea? They measure the unintended impact of a change idea on another area of the system. For example, concentrating on differentiated reading strategies so much that the weekly math test scores went down. There are many types of data, but there are some that are better for continuous improvement than others. These are pre-existing data, such as student work and attendance records, observation data, such as classroom walkthrough data and learning walks, and survey data, such as meeting feedback or exit tickets. Although these 3 types of data are the best for continuous improvement, they each have their pros and cons. Pre-existing data is best used for measuring student or adult knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and although it is easy to collect, and for the most part it is data you are already collecting, you may have to spend some time coding the data, and you may be limited in what you are able to collect. Observations are a great tool for measuring behaviors of both students and adults because the observer can see the implementation of the change idea firsthand. The participant's behavior could be influenced by having someone in the room, and depending on the tool being used for the observation, training is usually necessary. Surveys are good because they can capture a lot of information such as perceptions, beliefs, and attitudes. Anonymous surveys usually produce the most honest answers, and while closed-ended questions in surveys are easy to analyze, the same questions may miss pertinent info about the participants want to tell you. At the same time, if you offer open-ended questions, then you need to determine a way to code those answers. Appendix 1 of the Comprehensive Needs Assessment Toolkit has a list of various types of data types you can collect for measures when conducting your PDSA cycles. Now let's turn back to the PDSA worksheet. The plan section of the cycle is all about organization and planning ahead. At this point, you need to create your data collection plan and determine 1. Who will be gathering the different types of data, 2. What process and outcome measures you want to collect, 3. Where the data collection will take place. Will it be in classrooms, the hallways? 4. And finally, when will you be collecting and reviewing the data, including how often you will be collecting the data. Once you've created the full plan for the PDSA, including identifying the goal, change idea, making a prediction, and creating the data collection plan, you are ready to put it into action. Make sure everyone knows their roles, responsibilities, and expectations before you begin to test the change idea and collect the data. Once you have finished the actual test of the change idea, you need to study or analyze the results of the test. One of the most important parts of this section is to compare the predictions to the results. What did you learn? What was different from the results compared to what you predicted would happen? This is also the stage in the cycle when you ask and answer, was the cycle carried out as planned? What happened during the testing phase? What did you observe that was surprising? And what were the results? The final step of the PDSA cycle is to act. The team makes a decision as to whether or not to adopt the change idea and keep it as is and continue with implementation, adapt or refine the change idea based on the information collected in the first test cycle and develop a new plan to test, or abandon the change idea and to start the test cycle again with a new change idea. As you progress through your change ideas and the different iterations of your PDSA cycles, you will be increasing your knowledge base and moving higher on the ramp of knowledge, as we call it. Using small-scale testing and slowly building up and widening the scale is a longer process, but hopefully one that will bring more success once it is at a stage to be fully implemented. Once you decide to adopt or adapt a change idea and want to bring this small change to a larger scale, there are a few things you need to think about. You want to make sure that you have support from the entire system, including administration and teachers. You also need to make sure that you have the resources necessary to implement the change on a larger scale and that the people involved in implementing this change have the training they need to successfully implement. Thank you. If you have any questions about the continuous improvement process, including conducting comprehensive needs assessments and plan, do, study, act cycles, please contact the Education Quality Assurance team at the Agency of Education.